Are you more on serious? You guys still believe in ivermectin? What is it about this molecule that's so special? Please let me know. You know how you tried to buy this drug? It was discovered in 1975. This is such a big molecule. How's it going to get into any cell? Look how polar it is. How the fuck can it help cancer? It's not getting into any cells. What's the log P of this fucking thing? Wow. How? How is that possible? Doesn't seem like the log P would be that high. Well, anyway. So anyway, there's a lot of people who think ivermectin is useful. It's not. The shit is a joke. It's like a joke somebody told and people believed it and it kept propagating, and it's a great litmus test for how stupid somebody is. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm hoping there's somebody here who can like speak to it or defend it.
I am not that guy. I just want to say what's good.
All right.
Fucking shit out of stuff.
Okay, that's enough of you. Um, thanks, Cameron. Yeah, Fun Sauce, what's up, man?
Sorry, this isn't the question about ivermectin. Are you taking questions on the short still?
No. All right.
Sorry, you can take me off.
Get out of here. Any ivermectin retards out there, please. D. Hello, D. Wake up. Okay. Hello.
Well, I'm under the impression that ivermectin stuns and kills parasites inside the body or inside the gut. And the majority of people in the U.S. have parasites in their gut.
This is a great hypothesis. You know what you do when you have a hypothesis like this?
Well, I'm reaching.
All right, wait. I'm just asking you. Do you know what happens in science when we have a hypothesis?
No, fill me in.
We test it.
Okay.
So you just came up with a theory. It's wrong, by the way, but you know you can test. Oh, yeah, shut up for a second. Shut up. You came up with a theory. It's, possibly true. I know it not to be true, but regardless, the way you test this theory is you give 500 people ivermectin, you give 500 people placebo, and you see what the fuck happens. Instead of pretending you do the study and you find out. And unless you have a study that says it does it, we cannot assume or guess that it does. We assume that it doesn't do it until the study shows that it does. That is how the world works. Otherwise, we don't have a world that we can really live in and think through. This is the basic reasoning.
Has it not been proven that it's effective treatment on various parasitic diseases and killing and stunning them?
Of course, it's FDA approved for one very specific disease.
And the majority of Americans don't know this, but they do have parasites in their body.
The majority of Americans don't have.
Microbiomes are.
They don't have. First of all, you're wrong. The majority of Americans don't have the parasites that are treated by this drug. One, two. What does that have to do with cancer?
Well, I feel like it all stems from the microbiome.
Well, you can do a trial. You can do a clinical trial to see if it affects anything. You could put, like I said, whatever you think it does. You can do a clinical trial where you put 500 patients on drug and 500 patients on placebo, and you see what the fuck happens after a year, or however many years, or whatever your prediction is. And let me guess, you've never done any of this in biopharma before. This is your first.
No,
This is your first time. Yeah.
Very, very little any information on it other than me trying to. Only thing I know is like holistic health more of, and like trying to think of more natural ways of health.
Okay. There's people in the world that do this kind of thing for a living, where they look for drugs, they try to develop drugs. Some of them try to make money doing it, and we hunt meticulously throughout the world. I have people helping me to do this for medicines that could be used to help people and make us rich. I almost bought Ivermectin completely.
You solving the issue will stop you from making money. Your customers.
No, retard. we make the most money.
That's why
No, moron. No, moron. I assume you're like 19 years old, but let me help you understand this. We make the most money when we make the most impact. You can't charge a lot of money for a cancer drug that doesn't work. You can't charge any money for a cancer drug that doesn't work, actually. And when you design drugs, you can't say, okay, stop. Let's just make it just good enough. Just good enough that it kind of helps, and they need to be addicted and take it forever. Are you some kind of idiot? Have you ever gone to college? Have you ever done any biology? Do you think it's easy to just make a drug that just stops working after a second that you need to take forever? Like, I think people like you should honestly consider ending their lives. Like, I think that there's a lot of people like you that just are too stupid to have this conversation. Like, you're a dangerous person. You're literally dangerous. You don't understand the way clinical medicine is conducted. You don't understand causal relationships, basic logical thinking. I'm stunned that there are people like this that are that stupid out there. You've never been in biopharma. You've never developed a drug. You've never invented a drug. You probably can't tell me what the valence of nitrogen is. But you want to start to pontificate about what's fucking good medicine and what it isn't. What's wrong with people like you? Just fucking jump off a bridge. Like, honestly, I think that's you do the world a favor. Imagine thinking the pharmaceutical industry, which by the way is composed of millions of human beings that.
Okay, can I just put my point in?
What is your point, other than embarrassing yourself?
Back into history, pre-1900s, you see that everybody was using either a light frequency to heal you or.
You are. This has got to be a troll, right? What's up, Julio? You got
conglomerate corporations. They just need money.
Okay, yeah, you got to be trolling, right? All right, that was a good troll, I guess. What's up, Doctor? How are you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yo.
Yeah, I saw that clip and had the same exact reaction as you, and I like Joe Rogan, but that is literally going to get people killed. Like, just given his reach, just numbers, just 100%. I could see people going to their oncologist and asking for Ivermectin. At best, it's an awkward conversation. They continue the treatments, but Ivermectin's pretty easy to get on telehealth now.
That is so crazy. You probably don't know this, but I actually tried to buy this drug, which was called Shkreli, when Merck had it. And I had this mutual friend with Ken Frazier, and Merck really didn't want to sell it. And we offered this insane price. And they said they still wouldn't sell it because there were people at Merck way back when that were really proud of this drug and what it did from a humanitarian basis in Africa. I wanted to buy it, and you can imagine, raise the price dramatically. Which this world would be so much funnier if that version of the multiverse actually happened. And I don't.
Right now, oh my god.
But no, in all seriousness, another company.
Is it like what was the name of the drug? Is it like a microtubule inhibitor? One of those like albendazols?
Stromectol? No, it's not like albendazole or anything like that. It's a lactone. It's very, very polar. So like stays in the body forever. And in essence, it just sort of gets to these bizarre, it really isn't a great drug. It's not really clear even how it works, to be honest. It's just this very polar and toxic kind of molecule that it just seems to destroy parasites. Like a lot of these antiparasitics, Like the other one is.
Bipolar, or do you mean like?
It's got a very high log P. You're cutting out a little bit for me, but it's very nonpolar. Sorry, it's got a polar center, but it's very nonpolar. It's like I said, its log P is around 6. But what's interesting is like all these other drugs, like the schistosomiasis drug, for example, biltricide or praziquantel. You probably learned about that one in med school too. None of these drugs, it's really clear how they work because parasites are not really like that well understood to begin with. So, some people say they're ion channel inhibitors. Some people, it's just not clear. Like a lot of these drugs, nobody even bothers to do the binding studies to even bother to see like what crystal structure, where it's bound through a crystal structure or something like that. So these drugs are a little bit mysterious, and they're not used that often in America. But it's just so sad to see people like decide to become their own doctor. I don't know. I feel terrible. Like somebody needs to be the adult here and just fucking lay down the law.
Yeah, honestly, I really appreciate you doing this. I have a mother-in-law who is exactly how you're describing, where she thinks she's like a medical expert, and she's been like basically radicalized by Instagram Reels, just seeing all this content over and over again, just scaring her and making her think that like everything's gonna kill her. So I really appreciate you doing this because we really need more pushback from these morons.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you never know what could happen in medicine. So like you just do a clinical trial. I mean, that's they did clinical trials of ivermectin and COVID. It didn't work. And you can do trials of ivermectin in cancer if you want. And those won't work either. So like moving the puck from COVID to cancer, even after trials have failed, is just so gross. Like, I understand not trusting authority. Like I am the poster child for not trusting authority. Like it's what I do. But, there's that. And then there's this just like wild misunderstanding and again, I think the first guy was a troll, but I think a lot of people believe what he's saying, which is that drug companies don't like curing diseases, which is, just it's unfathomable mentally to think that there are actually people that believe that. And you can't imagine how many times I get that question of like, take an EGFR inhibitor, for example. If you have EGFR mutated non-small cell lung cancer, you know what protein is driving your tumor. You know exactly what is wrong with you. And scientists made a drug that stops that protein. It's just basically an EGFR inhibitor. And in fact, not only is that, but it stops the exact mutation that is resistant to the first generation EGFR mutants. You cannot make a better drug than this. It's exquisitely targeted to what's wrong with you. Ivermectin is not targeted to anything. It was made in 1975. They barely had these tools back then. So 50 years later, top scientists have made these drugs, and they work. The amazing response rate for the EGFR mutated non-small cell lung cancer is incredible. Because it stops exactly what you need to stop. HIV is a similar scenario where HIV drugs are remarkable. The new Lenacapavir from Gilead, it's a once every 6 months dose. You take it twice a year, and it keeps your HIV at bay, or it stops you from getting HIV in the first place if you're at risk. I mean, medicine's incredible, and the people that do this kind of stuff have worked really hard, and it's so insulting when somebody like Mel Gibson talking about ivermectin, Joe Rogan. Come on, I'm not saying these guys are stupid, but they're stupid on medicine. I'll say that.
And I can say this: I'm a doctor. I didn't even know how far cancer. So my mom just got diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer in May. 2 years ago, this probably would have been a death sentence. She was started. I already forgot the name of the drug. Combination chemotherapy with one of these PD-1 inhibitors, not Keytruda, but it's another one. She's cancer-free, and it's January, which is insane.
That's great. Yeah, PD-1 was another miracle. There's a funny story there. Again, I had all this beef with Merck and Schering-Plough. Schering-Plough, my friends were at Schering-Plough, and they sold Schering-Plough to Merck. And they shared a drug, a statin combination called Vytorin. It was statin and a cholesterol reabsorption inhibitor called Zetia and ezetimibe, yeah. And obviously the statin combination. So Merck bought out their partnership with Schering-Plough by buying out the whole company. But what they didn't realize is they were also buying one of the first PD-1 inhibitors. So they accidentally backed themselves into having the best cancer drug of all time. And, to their credit, they developed it. Yeah, give them credit. They developed it very vigorously. One of my friends, I actually tried to hire him to be the CEO of my drug company. He ended up very aggressively developing it. So it did become one of the world's best drugs through the hard work of people at Merck, but it wasn't intentional that they were to acquire it. But that's opportunity sometimes. They were prepared and they went after it when they had the chance. And Keytruda saved so many people's lives. So is Opdivo, and like the amount of attention that Ivermectin gets versus drugs that actually work, it's just sad to me because like there are real people that do this stuff and that work hard every day to make things better for themselves, their company, their families, their communities. Like hundreds of thousands of people that work at Merck and Pfizer and Eli Lilly. Do you think they're monsters? Do you think they're idiots? Do you think they're all in a conspiracy? Like, how dumb do you have to be to like think that there's this huge conspiracy that nobody's talking about that somehow stayed secret in the labs of these companies? But meanwhile, people at these companies do die of cancer too, and parents too. It's just like mind-bogglingly stupid. And again, there's no clear Ivermectin supporter here that isn't trolling, at least, that will engage in good faith because it's just too stupid. You can't. It's an untenable position.
Well, Martin, sorry if I unmuted myself without permission, but
no, I don't care.
Dan here. Yeah. I don't have a lot to contribute to this, but I think I could play devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
This whole thing got. I'll make the argument I think the Ivermectin supporter might make, which is, this whole thing got started during the pandemic, and if you look at, these peer-reviewed studies, there's dozens and dozens of studies showing some benefits to Ivermectin.
Well, there's no clinical studies.
And of course, I know it.
There's only
Right, so
preclinical studies.
The problem here is that people are not scientifically
literate.
They think that, right, and they see that there's actually a website. It's ivermecta.com, I think, that it's like an ongoing meta-analysis.
Not that meta-analyses are that great anyway. I mean,
Ivermectin, IVMmeta.com.
Okay.
But you can see, like, there's actually dozens of these studies. But
just give me
like
one.
Junior,
Like, give me one study and I'll critique it. Like, the thing about, and just so
I
give me a second. Just give me a second. So just for anybody out there that doesn't know, there's clinical trial that's in human beings, and that's there's a certain kind of clinical trial that's the gold standard, which is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Which, if I need to explain to you why that's a good thing, you should probably just not be involved in medicine at all. And then there's a preclinical study. So this is a study not in human beings. It can be in animals, it can be in cell lines and cell culture, but it's not in human beings. And you can imagine, you don't have to be a great scientist to see that the human clinical trial that's randomized and controlled is very useful, and that everything else is kind of not that useful, especially since you can kind of just make up that data and it doesn't mean much and it's just cell lines. So when you publish cell line data, I can go critique that stuff, but it's just not useful to publish some cell lines and say, okay, this is a great cancer drug, because there's thousands of drugs like that, maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. Every postdoc in the world has a drug that in a cell line looks like it's really great. And then when they do a human clinical trial, it doesn't look like it's so great. In fact, drug companies, for every single drug that does get FDA approved in cancer, they have about 100 or 200 ones that look great preclinically and that just don't work in humans, and they give up on them. And people like Vivek and myself made a living going around to these drug companies and buying their old drugs that they kind of overlooked and trying them again. This is like what I do. This ivermectin is like perfect for that. And the problem is it needs to work, and it doesn't. So it's just
Right,
yeah.
but your average Joe is looking at can go to these websites and they see like there's actually 52 ivermectin, according to this website, 52 ivermectin COVID-19 RCTs, and like most of them are so. The amount of like junk research that's been published on this is just crazy. Most of these are in countries like India, Bangladesh, and so there's an interesting thing where it seems that a lot in the countries where a lot of these countries do actually have people have parasites.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the tail wagging the dog.
And do you understand too that this is like COVID, and now so Mel Gibson said, my friends with stage 4 cancer. Okay, that's like saying like illness. Okay, like there's so many different types of cancer.
Yeah, he doesn't even understand what.
It's just saying that is just that alone. Like he might as well just say I just think.
Yeah, that.
I have a cure for all
illness. Retarded because it's all anecdotes.
It would have been a little bit smarter if you
search ivermectin cancer. There's one like Chinese study which is probably fake. Like most of those kind of studies are just fraudulent. But it's like the stuff that people are talking about is just anecdotes, and that's extremely irresponsible and dangerous.
Maybe we can find like a person that actually supports this drug for whatever reason, and they can explain why they support it.
Yeah, I don't support the drug. I just my thesis of what I've kind of seen is that people don't really like big pharma. Like you don't go to your doctor to get healthier.
Just real quick, Luke. So I don't disagree with that necessarily. But what's funny about that is that this was a drug made by Merck. Like this is a big pharma drug.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't
know. Merck invented and discovered ivermectin and got it FDA approved.
It's off patent. It's off patent now, so it's
still
generics and stuff. Right?
Yeah, but it was still big pharma. I mean,
I think you're massively underestimating the extent to which this anti-big pharma narrative is promoted, as young as elementary schools too. I mean, teachers are repeating this blather about the sick care system and all of this, and meanwhile, pharma is like not present.
Well, what's funny is like, so let's say that's all true, and I don't disagree with you at all, and I think that is all true. What does ivermectin have to do with that?
I'll tell you exactly what it does.
That's the craziest part to me. It's like, hate big pharma all you want, but why is ivermectin relevant?
Because it's something.
Well, hold on. The guy's talking. He's in the middle of talking.
It's all about the who. That's what it is. It's that these people have antipathy for people like Anthony Fauci, and yet they might like, let's say, Jim Jordan, and they just think about it in terms of personality. It's not clinical trials or anything else. Just like they think about sports.
It's it's the wrong team. It's Yankees or Red Sox.
That's what explains.
You want to be scientific? You want to be scientific? I'll be anti-scientific. I like ivermectin instead of the drugs that are proven to work. Like, but to me, it's like saying, okay, if there's a Democrat, my plumber is a Democrat. I look at my toilet, and even though I can understand medicinal chemistry and crystallography, I look at my toilet and I'm getting very confused very quickly, even though there's like 2 components to it. But what if my plumber was a Democrat, I should say, and I'm a Republican, my plumber comes in and says, Martin, I'm going to fix your toilet, and I see he has a Bernie sticker or something. I don't say, stop right there. You don't know how to fix my toilet. And the guy's been fixing toilets for 20 years. He fixed my buddy's toilet. I say, no, get out of here. What were you going to do to my toilet? You're going to turn this thing left? Well, I'm going to turn it right. You don't know toilets because you like Democrats and you like Bernie. You must be so stupid. You don't know how to fix this toilet. And the reality is, of course, the guy knows how to fix the toilet. We may not agree on politics, but this is what he does for a living. I don't fucking fix toilets for a living. Like I said, I look at these things and get very confused very quickly because it's not what I know. And, the guy knows how to do it. He knows what's clogged up or whatever. And I'd rather let him do it, even though I don't like Bernie Sanders a lot, than sit there and have my toilet stink up the house all day and not work ever again because I wanted to turn it left instead of right.
I think the issue too is like the pharma side of this that communicates, the truth about R&D and this and the other. It's a nameless, faceless communications campaign. Like you can't summon the face of the person who's there to tell you
that what a clinical trial is. You can't think of
there's no pharma bro that could actually be that that is that you could.
It's almost like we need somebody to before,
But in all seriousness, I feel like
you have 10 on the other side. You have RFK Jr. You have 25.
Well, let me just say.
Let's take a step back. I'm sorry.
Real quick, Doctor. I just want to say something real quick, and I'll give the floor to you. So I think that one of the funny things that happens here is that I'm sure you guys have heard of this phrase that you could have convictions loosely held. And some people say, they have a strongly held conviction. Well, this is a situation where everyone has a loosely held conviction. If you get diagnosed with stage 3 EGFR mutant positive non-small cell lung cancer and you go to your oncologist, you are absolutely not getting ivermectin. That guy's going to give you the exact drug that's molecularly tailored for your cancer. You're going to be happy. You're going to be cancer-free. If you want to go about it the Steve Jobs way, if you want to go about it some other way, you're functionally committing suicide. And if you want to functionally commit suicide, which some people do, I think Steve Jobs basically did, you can do that. And you can have that strongly held conviction. But in reality, the doctor is going to look at you and say, do you want to live 18 months with a chance to live 6 years? Or do you want to live 6 months? And you can take your pick. Nobody's going to fucking stop you, and nobody gives a shit. At the end of the day, you can die for your principles all you want. Anyway, doctor, please.
No, it's all good. I was going to say, ultimately, this is like a systematic thing that has occurred over the course of the last 5 years. And it has a lot more to do with the fact that everybody became an epidemiologist suddenly during the pandemic. Everybody thinks that they understand how things work suddenly during the pandemic. And even taking a step back, it's saying, hey, how do you discredit everything? Well, you discredit the fact that papers are completely made up. Now, everybody that's in the actual industry and is actually taking care of patients knows that of course papers have trouble with being reproduced. We know that the Nature study, I don't know if you guys saw it, but 33% of papers can be reproduced. Makes sense. And clinical trials have their own issues, and there's a lot of corruption in the FDA. I don't think anybody here will say it's not true. But if you're asking for so much evidence, and you're asking for so much backing into, well, why should we take, for example, something really controversial like the COVID vaccine for some people, right? Sure. But then, why are we not asking the same questions of the supplement industry? Why aren't we asking the same questions of ivermectin? The one really good meta-analysis on ivermectin actually showed that metformin was better for COVID than ivermectin.
That makes sense.
It was a really well-done study.
Well,
isn't that ironic? That, literally the one major, it was McMaster's and Brazil, they did a large study. They showed that fluvoxamine and metformin were actually better at early treatment than ivermectin.
Yeah, nobody's trying to get metformin or fluvoxamine. But real quick, one thing I'd say is that I would push back pretty heavily on some of the stuff you said. Preclinical studies are very hard to replicate. Scientists have NIH grants. There was this recent controversy I was involved in called Cassava Sciences, where there was this huge amount of fraud. In fact, the unprecedented step of a PI getting arrested by the FBI and getting charged with fraud to get NIH grants was really unprecedented. An old Chinese guy pulled out of his lab by FBI agents over doctoring published data. As you said, in the industry, we kind of are used to preclinical studies being fraudulent or kind of not replicatable at least. But I'm sorry, when it comes to clinical trials, I get paid basically to scrutinize clinical trials, analyze them really carefully, and make a bet. And clinical trial publications are usually very robust.
It depends on who's doing the clinical trial, whether it's third party or not. Advocom is the best example.
Well, I'll say for pharmaceutical companies, clinical trials, when they're published, you're in the middle of my sentence. Pharmaceutical clinical trials that get published are very close to 100% reliable.
Again, I'll give you a really good example of one that was an incredible controversy. Aduhelm.
Yeah, that's sort of like the exception, But those,
I agree.
The thing with that one is the results were not questioned when they published those results. They showed a modest effect. It was really the FDA that made that one controversial. It's not the sanctity of the actual results. The results were published in New England. They were what they were. They were very
There were barely any results.
barely useful. So like to me, that's not a failure of the publication apparatus. That's a failure of the FDA in that case, 1 in a million, where they kind of said, well, there are two ways to look at medicine. Medicine.
Martin, the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay, you just love interrupting me in sentence. So they sort of looked at it as two ways, and I see this all the time in medicine, especially in rare and tough diseases where there's no treatments. The FDA says, okay, we can either say no, yet again, for every one of these ALS drugs, every one of these Alzheimer's drugs, every one of these drugs for Duchenne muscular dystrophy where children are dying, or we can say, you know what, let's give it a conditional approval on, contingent on a large phase 3 that will be done probably never, but to do it again. And I think that, there is a side of the FDA that thinks that way, this right to try movement. It's up to the doctor to decide, is this right for my patient? Not so much up to FDA always. And, I sympathize very small amount with that. They should not have approved Aduhelm. And now what was funny about Aduhelm is even though it was approved, nobody used it. All the doctors said, yeah, I know this thing doesn't work. I read the New England Journal paper. I'm not going to use it. Fuck that. And Biogen couldn't sell any of it. So, their new drug does work, and they're still having trouble selling that one because of the overhang of Aduhelm. So it's funny, the amyloid beta antibodies are actually probably should be being used more often, at least the donanemab and the other Biogen one, lecanemab. But it's funny that the Aduhelm aducanumab disaster kind of has clouded that whole class of drugs, even though the donanemab data are pristine and published and nobody doubts that they work. So to me, I think that the stuff on replicatability is really important, but a good phase 3 trial that works will get published in a top journal. And the only articles I saw in the New England Journal for any of these drugs show that they didn't work, like ivermectin and fluoxamine and so forth. Like there would be a 100-patient study that just randomly, if you do a study, like randomly one side will look better than the other. And then when they did the big study failed. But if you're some weirdo conspiracy theorist, you want to say this is because of Illuminati, big pharma, etc. When the reality is, like, if you meet these big pharma people, they're all idiots. None of them could conjure a conspiracy to save their life, especially not one involving hundreds of clinical trial sites with a double-blind, CRO-controlled. Like, so you're telling me the CRO's involved, big pharma's involved, Illuminati's involved, government's involved, and they're all to fix a clinical trial? Maybe the drug just doesn't fucking work because it was invented in 1975. It doesn't do anything.
Somebody was mentioning about like having like a poster boy for like pharma, and I think a lot of this has to do with like it's all anti-institutional, right? That's just for good reason. Some people just don't like institutions. And Martin, I think you are actually have a lot of friends with those people, a lot of people like you, people like you.
I went to jail going against institutions.
morbid obesity, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver. They're studying it in also for sleep apnea. And I was part in some research when the Ozempic was under phase 1 and phase 2 trial, and it had results then, and now it's a very significant, important medicine, which kind of changed some of the medicine because now the disease are controlled and the end organ damage are controlled. So there are some negative and positive, but this belief of ivermectin retards is both spectrum, on the extreme right and extreme left. I've seen some of the extreme right people who came in and they were like, no, we want ivermectin, hydrochloroquine. And there's one which is right on the left, and they're all green. They don't want any chemicals in their body, and they analysis everything on the bottle, what it says.
Right.
And so it's both the side. It's not
I think it's, yeah, and I think we're getting at the social part of it that Julio and others, Julio, I should say. I always mess this up.
It's
Julio. Yeah. That I think we're getting at, which is that this is a societal phenomenon where people want to stick it to authority. People are sick of authority. Authority has encroached on us in a lot of ways. Censorship online, taxes, Patriot Act and monitoring our communications, sending people to jail for no reason. That's why Trump won. I don't know if landslide's the right word, but that's why he won, because there's a huge backlash against this type of mentality that is overarching and overbearing, and we hate it. So that has affected everyone differently. For me, it hasn't changed my life's work of loving science and studying it and knowing what good science looks like and knowing what bad science looks like, and sometimes making millions of dollars short selling bad science, and the other way around. And then, for some people, though, it's colored everything, where they've said, I don't trust anything anymore. And I think that it's not the worst thing in the world to say you trust things less, but it's not healthy to say you trust nothing anymore. And it's really unhealthy to say you don't trust things so much that you're going to go on the other side and say, I'm going to do everything my way. And it's just irresponsible, because it's sort of like saying the airplane that was built, I don't trust it, I'm going to build my own airplane. Look at Boeing, they're corrupt, they're bad people. No, you're going to just go on an airplane and you're going to shut up. And, it's the same thing when you literally everything you do. Or you can be Amish. You can be Amish and you can go, live on a farm or something. Or you could be like Terry Davis and write your own OS. You can make your own router. you can make your own programming language. You can do everything from scratch. And it's just kind of nuts. But there are people like this. And I feel like, it's helpful in these online echo chambers. It's helpful to raise one's hand and say, no, you're not being normal. You're being weird. You're being an idiot. And not so much to shut down inquiry, by the way. The inquiry could be something like, we should do a phase 3 trial. A drug company, like, why don't we pressure Eli Lilly, who's worth $1 trillion, right? Eli Lilly's almost, it's $750 billion at the moment. It had a little downdraft, but Eli Lilly is the biggest drug company in the history of the world. It would be very easy for Eli Lilly to spend $50 million and do a phase 3 clinical trial of any of these drugs in any disease and publish the results, have it be monitored by a third party, all the normal stuff, CRO, and we could show the world this just doesn't work. Have Joe Rogan. Like, I think that the CEO of Eli Lilly go on Joe Rogan and say, hey, all this shit you're doing is really unhelpful. You're full of shit. And Joe Rogan could sit there and say, oh, yeah, well, you're full of shit. And all the CEO of Eli Lilly has to do is say, okay, I have $100 million for you. Design the clinical trial you think will work. And I'll prove to you it doesn't work. And you could do all the monitoring. You can run the fucking study if you want. And I think that would go a much longer way. Like, there were people in the 80s that were proponents of ESP. Extrasensory perception, that they could guess the number in your mind and stuff like that. Even Alan Turing himself believed in this. And it was conclusively disproven that you cannot read people's thoughts. This reminds me of that we can just guess that there are drugs that work for diseases without doing the trials. It's flabbergasted me. And I think that, the better thing to do is to prove people wrong as opposed to engage them and fight with them. Just say, okay, do the trial. You think it works? Go ahead, do the trial. And I even think the Congress could give ivermectin regulatory approval, for regulatory exclusivity, so that it does get a new patent. By the way, you can always adjust a drug like very modestly to get a new patent. But in any event, if it's so good, fucking pay for it. Do the clinical trial.
Make a prediction market out of it.
Right, exactly. A prediction market can fund it or whatever. Like, it's just so stupid to think like, oh, I bet this, no, I bet that. Well, why don't we just find out? I think people don't trust that process and trust that somebody responsible is going to work correctly. They're just going to go back to, of course you said it didn't work. You were really, you're a vested interest that it doesn't work. And it just keeps going back in a circle. That's really unhelpful. So I don't know what the answer is other than ignore stupidity, but I also feel like when millions of people see something broken comes out, that somebody has to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. And for me, just meant to be one message, one tweet, but ends up getting a million views, and people want to hear more. But mostly people just want to yell, scream, and feel like really, I don't know, like angsty and angry at authority in general, not just pharma, but just any kind of purported authority.
And you saw I think the third phase, because it was an emergency thing, it just got pushed everywhere. Like those trials weren't.
What are you talking about, the vaccine?
The vaccine, yeah. And that,
Yeah, I would consider that a big pharma success story that saved probably tens of millions of lives. So
yeah,
that's where I see the split though, because I see a lot of people saying the opposite, like young people are having heart problems, like all these adverse things.
Myocarditis.
Yeah, I believe that's what it's called.
But isn't that okay? Like, I have like a question there, like serious question. A lot of people talk about this, but from my understanding of myocarditis, it's something that is actually like common in a lot of viral infections, and it's like this transient like condition.
Yeah, it's like an autoimmune response following a viral. Usually, you can get it with other vaccines as well, but it's just essentially inflammation of the heart. It's self-limiting, goes away.
Well, you still have that question of is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So, are you getting sufficiently? This is literally why the FDA exists, because this is a tough question. Are you getting the therapeutic benefit in exchange for the therapeutic drawback? There's always a drawback. Even just administering a drug is a drawback. Let alone the coordination of administering medicine. And the vigilance, the pharmacovigilance that has to occur to observe it and monitor it, let alone the invasiveness of an intramuscular injection, the pain of it, the massive immune response that you get, all these things are annoying. So the question remains, was this a therapeutically beneficial thing to do? And I don't think the right answer is just to scream, clot shot, big pharma, et cetera. The therapeutic, the question is, from both a clinical trial perspective, where the clinical trial data were excellent for what it's worth, but then from a meta perspective, the epidemiological public health perspective, knowing that a clinical trial is a point in time and that it's a point in time that can't be recreated. When you do a clinical trial of psoriasis patients and it clears their skin, you can feel very comfortable that when you give your patient the drug that was done in that clinical trial, that your psoriasis patient is probably like the other 1,000 psoriasis patients that took it, and that you'll see the same effect. But in public health and epidemiology, you have a really hard time doing that because this clinical trial occurred when this virus was just coming out and it had remarkable results. But we know viruses change. There's selective pressure. There's all kinds of things that happen with herd immunity and whatnot. The mutations resulted in these vaccines perhaps not working as well as they did in the clinical trial, or whatever the reason is. The point is that it's something that's pretty unpredictable. And I think when you do public health, it's very challenging to get this right. But it's not I think here you have the same dynamic of the fault or the blame displacement. So the blame I have on the establishment is that I got arrested and I had to spend 4 years in prison learning, urban slang and urban, sort of lore. I know all types of information about guns and gangs and drugs that you will never need to know. I'm an expert in these areas because I spent 4 years hanging out with gangbangers, and I'm annoyed by that, and I'm frustrated by that, and I made the most of it, but I'm still really angry at somebody for that, and that somebody is amorphous. There's no one person that I have to be angry at. It's this whole establishment. There's this whole institution of authority that I hate. And, maybe that means I should cast a vote for somebody differently. But for some people, it means I'm going to be angry at all of the authority, all of the so-called experts. They all suck. I hate them all. And I think that's where, these kind of phenomenons happen. And if you look at Mel Gibson, I don't have a ton to say about this guy, but basically he's become a huge anti-Semite, which is, I was born Catholic for what it's worth, here in New York City. A lot of people, when they get angry, and this isn't just now, but over the last thousands of years, they seem to, for whatever reason, want to blame Jewish people. And, Mel Gibson, got into this very kind of anti-Semitic mode where he turned from like this relatively normal actor into this kind of whack job. And there's a South Park episode about him where he's just like running around and smearing his feces all over the place, and the kids are sort of laughing at him, but it's a great episode. But the point is that the guy is just out of control, and he's been sort of canceled, and people want to sort of make something about his cancellation more than what it is. He's just canceled because he's crazy. And, I have no reason to sort of like feel one way about it or the other. He made a film. He stopped making films, I guess. People, have sort of blacklisted him. But, for him to be angry at that and then blame Jewish people, now blame the medical industry, I could understand him blaming, people in Hollywood and say, okay, this is what Hollywood did to me. Well, that's your circle. But now you take your anger and blame and go point at the medical industry and say, okay, ivermectin's a treatment for cancer. Well, no, it's not. What do you know about treatments for cancer? I could quiz you for 5 minutes about basic science like cell theory, cell biology, basic like high school, even middle school chemistry, and you would fail because you don't know about this stuff. Any more than I know what 38 millimeter film is. I have no idea how to make a movie or all the intricacies that go into that. I don't know what SAG is or whatever that stuff is. Like, I have no clue. You quiz me on that, I would fail immediately. I couldn't tell you what the Golden Globes are. But that's not my area. I stay in my lane. This is my lane. Medicine is my thing. And anybody who's watched me over the last even 2 years, but even over 20 years knows that like one of the things I do the best is point out fraud in medicine and short sell stocks that have drugs that don't work. And by and large, the drug industry, 80-90% of it is really pretty honest, trying to make a great drug. The other 20% isn't fraud. It's just companies that they kind of should know better than to try to develop a drug that doesn't work. But in terms of drugs that get FDA approved, those are 99.9% kind of good to go. And again, I call them out when I see them. Like there was a drug called lorcaserin, which was a drug from Arena Pharma that was acquired by Pfizer. And I had a private meeting with the FDA where I urged them to not approve this drug. This is a weight loss drug. It was a 5-HT2A antagonist, or it was 2C antagonist. And so the 2B antagonist was known as fen-phen, which you guys may remember, the fenfluramine part of fen-phen, not the phentermine part. So fenfluramine was a 5-HT2B antagonist, which was had caused cardiovascular problems because that enzyme's expressed, or that channel is expressed in cardiovascular tissue. And so I came up with all this information about 5-HT2B or 2C antagonist lorcaserin. It only resulted in 2% weight loss above placebo, which is basically nothing. And I said, it's not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here. This is a new molecule. It's really dangerous. Should not be FDA approved. They approved it anyway. And 5 years later, the manufacturer took the drug off the market and the FDA demanded that they do that. So the point is, like, I have no vested interest against any of these companies. I love making money by short selling them and taking them to task, whether it's at FDA or in the public or whatever. It's just sad to me that, people will throw away their brain because they hate something or they hate authority or they hate big pharma, but they'll also take those medicines when they need them. It's.
I had a quick question, actually. I don't want to sidetrack too much. But what is your opinion on exenatide? Because that was also like GLP-1 agonist, but obviously not nearly the.
That was the first. It was the first GLP. I remember when I was 17 and I read about it. It was a Gila monster venom molecule through mass spec, they found that the Gila monster, which is this weird little lizard, runs around and spits its venom, and it's got GLP in the venom. And we, basically this company called Amylin, which they named their company after another gut hormone called amylin. Amylin Pharmaceuticals synthesized it. They called it exenatide, and they got it approved for diabetes. And that was the start of the GLP phenomenon. That was approved by the FDA in 2005. I remember very distinctly because I was shorting it because I didn't think people would use the drug very often. It wasn't.
You were right.
Well, I was wrong and I was right in some ways because it was a daily injection. It was actually a twice daily injection. It was terrible. And then eventually they made a long-acting version, and then Eli Lilly made a super long-acting version called Trulicity that sold really well. And then Ozempic and Mounjaro came out, and the third generation GLPs were incredible drugs that millions of people are taking, and has been a renaissance for pharma. So again, if you can't color pharma with one brush. There's obviously companies that aren't that great, like Purdue, that don't really do research, and there's companies like Lilly that do a really great job. And so, I don't know. To me, this whole thing is so stupid. But I just wanted to address it real quick. I got to run. Thanks so much, guys, for joining. If there's somebody that from the pro Ivermectin camp that wants to have a debate, I certainly could understand why you wouldn't want to do that, but I'd be certainly as friendly as possible and very open-minded. But it's just totally irresponsible in my opinion. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. All right, guys. We'll see you a little later, hopefully as soon as possible, because I think Friday will continue to be an exciting trading day here. See you soon.